When creating or executing automation scripts, there's a number of options you can configure to change the behavior of your script. It's important to understand what each option represents. In this video, I'm going to explain each option and show you how to configure them correctly. I already have some scripts on my DataMiner that interact with Singular Live. I'm going to use these scripts to explain to you the difference whenever you are changing some of the options when creating or executing your script. So let's connect to DataMiner Cube, and I'll start with the options you need to take into account when creating your scripts. So here I'm connected to DataMiner Cube and have the automation app opened. The options you need to take into account when creating your script are available below this Show Details button. You'll notice there are actually 4 options you need to take into account, and I'll just run through them one by one. The first one is supports back-forward buttons in interactive mode. Interactive mode means that there are some screens in your script where a user can interact with. In this script, for example, when my main stream would not be active, a user will be shown a screen where he can select if he wants to switch to a backup stream or not. If I don't enable this option and execute this script, you'll see I get this pop-up and I can select if I want to switch or not. If I select yes, I'm going to another screen where I can actually type the name of my backup. If I, however, enable this option and save again, if I now run the same script, you'll see that there are back and forward buttons. If I, for example, select yes again, I can now go back to my previous screen. This option is really specific to interactive mode only, and you can also always add your own buttons. This applies to interactive mode using the user interaction action, but it also applies whenever you are using interaction with C#. However, we haven't gone deeper into this will be for future videos. Okay, to explain the next option, I'm going to use another Singular Live script, which is this one. This script is quite basic. It takes our Singular Live element and immediately executes the action we want to execute. Do not fail when elements are not active or in timeout means if this option is disabled. Whenever one of the elements I'm using through my dummies is inactive or in timeout, my script will immediately fail. So let me show you how that works or looks like. If I select the action show, for example, and execute my script, it's running fine because my element is active and not in timeout. If I select the backup, which is currently a stopped element, and execute, you'll notice my script didn't start because my element is not active or not available or does not exist. If I now enable this option, I will be able to run my script even though my element is inactive. However, what this script does is setting a parameter. I will never be able to set a parameter on an element that is stopped. So in that case, if I use that stopped element again, you'll see I no longer get the same error. My script actually did start, but it failed because it couldn't do any gets or sets on that element as it stopped. When you are using this option, make sure that the element doesn't have to be started. For example, if you just want to apply a different alarm template, then your element doesn't need to be active for that. But as soon as you try to retrieve or set parameters, this option should be disabled because your element will need to be active. Also note that this option only applies to the specific actions you can see here. If you are working with C#, for example, so this is more or less the same script, but it's using C#, then instead of that option, you can check yourself if your element is active or not, as you can see here. In that case, if my element is not active, I'm going to exit my script myself and show a custom failure. Okay, the next option I want to show you is write comments to log file. I'm going to use the same script as I did before. And I actually added some comments already in this script. So here I just added a comment, what I actually did, showing the banner, hiding the banner, or in this case, showing and hiding. Now, when I enable this option, my comments will be written to automation logging. Where can you find that automation logging? You go to Apps, System Center, then select Logging, then go to DataMiner, and here you will have logging for each agent in your cluster. If you open this one up, you can select the automation logging, and here you'll see there is already some logging available whenever I started my script, for example, or in this case, the error that the parameter could not be retrieved. Now, if I execute my script with this option enabled, and I want to actually log my comments, then you'll see if I refresh this, that my comments have not been added. To actually add your comments, you'll need to override the log settings and set the debug logging to log everything or development logging. This will actually also generate additional logging, but if I now execute my script again and refresh, you will notice that my comment has been logged. Now, of course, instead of adding comments to your script, you can always add log messages. But what is the advantage of this? These comments are there and they will never be logged unless you actually enable this option. Okay, and then the last one I want to highlight is only applicable for C#. So for that, I'm going to use my C# script. And this one actually means that whenever you do a get parameter of a parameter that is not initialized, DataMiner will return null. If you don't enable that option, an exception will be thrown. So in this case, in my main stream, my state is actually not initialized. So if I don't enable this option and save it, first here I retrieve my singular life element, but from my stream I also want to check the state here. So I'm going to retrieve that parameter. Now that my option is disabled, let me execute my script. Select singular life, select show, for example. If I now execute, you'll notice an exception is thrown because my parameter, so that's actually the parameter here I'm trying to retrieve, is undefined. Now, if I instead don't want an exception to be thrown, I can select this option and then that exception will no longer occur, but null will be returned. I just need to make sure then in my code that I can support that and won't crash on it. So here I'm converting to string, which means if I would retrieve or get null back, I would just have an empty string here, which would not be running, and my script will also fail. So let me save and execute that again. Select the same element and action. If I now execute, you can see my script actually didn't crash because that is not initialized. Instead, my own exception is displayed because my stream is not running. These were the options you need to take into account when creating your automation scripts. Let's now have a look at the options that are important whenever you execute an automation script. So for that, I'm going to use the same scripts I already had. Let's start with the action script again. We will no longer have a look at these options. I'll just make sure that I change these again to the defaults and hide this. So whenever I execute a script, you'll notice I also have some available here. Some of them only apply when you are working with subscripts. So to show you the first one, I'm actually going to use the stream script here, because this one actually executes my action script. And I'm enabling the same options here. To show you the difference when using this option, I have an information event whenever my subscript starts and when it ends. What this option actually means is that if I don't, or if I enable this, my main script that's triggering or executing this subscript will wait with its execution or with the remaining actions until the subscript is fully done. If I don't enable it, it will simply trigger the subscript and immediately continue with its own actions. So to show you, I added this information events. So let's clear these here so you can clearly see this. And in my action script, I'm going to use this fade action, and I added a sleep of 20 seconds in between so we can clearly see the difference. Let me first make sure my main stream is running so it doesn't have to switch to my backup. So let me clear these again and execute my stream script. So now note the option is enabled. If I now execute, make sure I select fade in this case, you'll notice this option here is not available because it only applies to subscripts. So if I now execute, you can see my start information event. This is the action executed by my subscript. Now it's waiting for 20 seconds. So you can see my start information event is executed because that was before my subscript. And now it is executing the script and will only generate this information event when the script is done. So here you can see that there are actually 20 seconds in between that because my subscript had to be done first. So now my main script is also done. Let me now disable this and save it again. Let me clear the information events again so you can clearly see it. Close this one. So now I'm going to do the exact same script. The only difference is that I changed that option for my subscript. So if I now execute, you can see my start and stop action are immediately executed after one another. And my subscript is still running because only the in has been executed. Now it's waiting for 20 seconds again before it will set the out. But my main script has already stopped running, as you can see here. And now you can see my subscript is also done. It's quite important to understand this option, because if you need specific things in your main script that first need to be done here, make sure this option is enabled. The next option I want to highlight is actually this: after executing a set command, check if the read parameter or property has been set to the new value. This option doesn't only apply to subscripts. This is in general whenever you are executing a script, for example, like we do here. If I execute my script and enable this option, DataMiner will actually check if the read parameter or the property has actually changed to the value you set. DataMiner will retry that check every 50 times, every 50 milliseconds, and after 50 checks that value was not changed to the value you set, your script will fail because your set did not succeed. Now, to test this, I actually changed the script a little bit, and when I select show, instead of showing this banner, I'm going to show a logo. This should work fine, but I will also change the text on that logo, and that will fail because that logo doesn't support any text. So let me execute my script with the show action and enable this option. If I now execute, my script is doing these sets and it's checking if my value changed. Let's wait until it retried for 50 times. Now you can see that it could not verify that my parameter was updated. The last value here is an exception value because that is not applicable. If I wouldn't enable this option and execute again, then my script worked just fine, but actually that set didn't work. Now, if you don't want your script to crash, but you still want that your sets actually succeed, then you can always add some logic yourself to verify if your sets are actually working or not. Okay, the next option is the lock elements and force lock elements. If I open my singular live script here, or element, and I execute the fade action, which takes quite some time. If I lock my element, you'll notice that at the bottom here, it's indicating that my element is now locked. That means if I now would do a set on that element, that set will only be done after my script is finished and has unlocked this element. So let me, in the meantime that it's busy with this action, also open an additional execute window for the same script. If here, for example, I want to do hide and I don't lock, and here I do, if I execute this one, hide is a very quick action, but this script will take time because my other script is still locking that singular live element. Now this one will need to do all its actions first, release the lock on my singular live element, and only after that the hide will be executed. And then you can see it's immediately done because that action only takes a couple of seconds basically. If I don't lock my element, execute the fade, my logo will be, or banner will be displayed, but if I immediately do this one, it's actually already hidden. It's not waiting for the 20 seconds anymore. Here it will execute the hide action now as well, but it will already have been hidden. So if you want to make sure this option works correctly, you'll need to lock your element. Now, why was this one waiting? Because the wait when locked or busy was actually enabled. If I would lock the element again, and here I don't wait, if I execute this one, that takes about 20 seconds. If I execute here, you'll notice that I get an error because I don't have permission for that set, and I don't have permission because my element is locked by another script. So that's why this option is also important and related to that one. You'll notice there's also a force lock elements that can be enabled only when also enabling the lock elements. So if I enable this one here and execute that script, if I now execute, it will actually have stolen the lock of this script. So now you'll see that this element is not locked anymore, and I would actually be able to update this or execute this script again. This one will continue like it's already doing, but the element will no longer be locked. So again, this setting could have overwritten whatever settings are done here. Now, the last option that is available here is mark dummy elements in use once task is active and scheduled. This option only applies whenever you are executing your script from a scheduled task. That's why I'm going to leave this option for now, and we'll come back to this when we explain in more detail what scheduled task or how you can use scripts from a scheduled task. So these were all the options you need to take into account when creating and when executing automation scripts. Now that you know these, you really know all the ins and outs to create and execute automation scripts from DataMiner Cube.